Have you ever witnessed a situation where someone you respect is treated unfairly, but you don't know how to step in? Imagine being at a high-end store, surrounded by expensive merchandise and elite clientele, when something unexpected happens. Lee Min-ho, the famous actor, is shopping with his waiter, who has accompanied him for years. The two are casually browsing through the store, but everything takes a sudden, uncomfortable turn when an entitled customer decides to target the waiter. The store is quiet, with soft background music playing as customers sift through luxury items. Lee Min-ho's waiter, a quiet and polite man who has served him with loyalty and dedication, follows behind the actor. As they look at different pieces of art, clothes, and accessories, the waiter notices a customer who seems to be acting a little too loudly for such a peaceful environment. The man, who appears to be in his mid-40s and dressed in a very expensive suit, walks past the pair with a disdainful glance at the waiter. The actor doesn't notice at first, but the waiter feels the sting of the customer's judgment. The man seems to think that the waiter doesn't belong in such an upscale store, and the tension starts to build when he loudly comments, "What's the help doing here? This is no place for someone like you." The words are out before anyone can react, and there's a noticeable shift in the atmosphere of the store. The staff, who were previously calm and welcoming, now look over with a sense of unease. The customer's voice carries, making it clear he doesn't believe someone like the waiter should be shopping at such a store. The waiter, clearly embarrassed but maintaining his composure, doesn't respond. He simply looks down, trying to ignore the harsh words. He's used to dealing with rude customers, but it's never easy to swallow the humiliation. However, Lee Min-ho, who has been quietly observing from a distance, senses the tension. He doesn't immediately react, but he's keenly aware of what's happening. The actor has always been known for his kindness and humility, but what will he do in a situation like this? Will he step in and stand up for his loyal employee, or will he let the situation slide? Lee Min-ho, who had been quietly browsing through the store, suddenly feels a shift in the atmosphere. He looks up, his eyes locking onto the scene unfolding before him. The moment he notices the discomfort on his waiter's face, his calm demeanor turns into one of quiet resolve. It's not the first time Lee Min-ho has witnessed someone being belittled or disrespected, but something about this moment stirs him deeply. The waiter, who has been with him for so many years, deserves more than just silence in the face of this humiliation. Without missing a beat, Lee Min-ho calmly walks over to the scene, his footsteps deliberate, and his presence commanding attention. The entitled man, still scoffing at the waiter, does not initially notice Lee Min-ho approaching. The actor's quiet confidence begins to shift the energy in the room as his figure comes into full view. "Excuse me," Lee Min-ho's voice is calm but firm. The man, still fixated on the waiter, turns toward the actor in surprise. He recognizes Lee Min-ho immediately but seems unfazed by his presence at first. The actor continues, his tone clear and resolute, "I couldn't help but overhear your comments. And I want to make it clear, there is no place for that kind of behavior here." The entitled man's eyes widen as the realization hits him. This isn't just a customer or a random person intervening, this is Lee Min-ho, a globally recognized star. The room goes silent, the weight of Lee Min-ho's words settling over the store. The man stumbles over his words, clearly embarrassed now, as he tries to backtrack. "Oh, I didn't know. I didn't mean to." Lee Min-ho, however, doesn't give him the chance to apologize in a half-hearted manner. "It doesn't matter if you knew who he is or who I am," the actor says, his voice steady and unwavering. "What matters is respect. Every person in this store, regardless of their position, deserves to be treated with dignity." The man's face flushes with embarrassment as the gravity of his actions sinks in. He had assumed his status, wealth, and position gave him the right to speak down to the waiter, but now it was clear that those assumptions were misplaced. The store's atmosphere has completely shifted from discomfort to tension as the other customers watch this confrontation unfold. Lee Min-ho takes a small step forward, ensuring that all eyes in the store are on the moment of clarity he's creating. He doesn't shout or escalate the situation, he simply holds his ground, making it known that kindness and respect are non-negotiable. "I don't care if you're a regular here or if you have the money to buy the entire store," Lee Min-ho continues, his gaze steady and unwavering. "Everyone deserves to be treated with the same amount of respect. So please, remember that next time you choose to speak." The entitled man, who had been so quick to belittle the waiter, now looks visibly uncomfortable. He stammers for a moment, trying to recover from the unexpected public reprimand, but it's too late. The damage has been done, and Lee Min-ho's words have left an undeniable impression on him. As the man lowers his head and mutters a half-hearted apology, Lee Min-ho turns back toward the waiter, his expression softening. "Are you okay?" he asks quietly, his tone now gentle. The waiter, though still a little shaken, nods gratefully. "Yes, thank you," he replies, his voice filled with appreciation. He never expected Lee Min-ho to intervene in such a direct way, but the actor's defense wasn't just about standing up for him, it was about standing up for what was right. Lee Min-ho smiles warmly at the waiter. "You don't have to thank me," he says. "No one should be treated like that, not you, not anyone." With that, the moment of tension dissolves, and the store's atmosphere returns to normal. The entitled man, now silent and clearly embarrassed, takes a step back, choosing to leave without another word. The other customers, who had witnessed the incident, begin to murmur among themselves, but the tension is no longer uncomfortable, it's replaced with a sense of admiration for the way Lee Min-ho handled the situation. As the scene settles, the waiter breathes a sigh of relief. He knows that, in that moment, Lee Min-ho didn't just defend him as an employee, he defended him as a person, showing that kindness and respect are always worth fighting for. The atmosphere in the store gradually returns to a semblance of normalcy, but there's an undeniable shift in the energy. The few customers who had been watching closely exchange knowing glances, silently reflecting on what just transpired. What was meant to be an ordinary shopping trip turned into a powerful moment of respect and understanding. Lee Min-ho's quiet yet firm intervention had set the tone for the rest of the evening. He had not only stood up for his waiter but had also subtly reminded everyone around him of the importance of dignity in every interaction. As they continued their shopping, the waiter walked a little taller, a small but significant change. For years, he had served Lee Min-ho with unwavering dedication, always staying in the background, doing his job quietly and without complaint. He had never expected to be treated like this, especially in a public setting. It wasn't just about the apology from the rude customer, it was about the validation of his worth as a person. Lee Min-ho, ever the humble man, wasn't focused on the fact that he had received applause from those around him. He wasn't concerned with the recognition. For him, this was simply the right thing to do. As they moved through the store, he gave his waiter an encouraging smile, saying nothing at first, but the look in his eyes spoke volumes. He didn't need to say much, his actions had already conveyed his message loud and clear. "I don't know how to thank you," the waiter said quietly after a moment, his voice filled with gratitude. He had seen a different side of Lee Min-ho that day, one that was even more admirable than the public persona the actor presented. In that moment, the actor had not just been a celebrity, he had been a friend, standing up for someone who mattered to him. Lee Min-ho shrugged with a smile, brushing off the gratitude. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "You're part of the team. And no one should have to tolerate that kind of treatment, no matter who they are. You deserve respect just like anyone else." His words were simple, but they had a profound impact on the waiter. It wasn't just about being defended in front of strangers, it was about the fact that Lee Min-ho had used his influence to challenge a harmful attitude, reinforcing the idea that no one should ever be made to feel inferior based on their job or status. As they made their way to the checkout counter, the waiter noticed a subtle change in the way the other customers treated them. Some of the same people who had witnessed the exchange earlier were now offering smiles and nods of approval, their expressions warmer than before. It was as though Lee Min-ho's actions had set a new tone for everyone, reminding them that respect for others isn't just a nice gesture, it's a fundamental part of how we should all interact with one another. When they left the store, Lee Min-ho's waiter couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. For the first time, he felt as though he was truly seen not just as a member of the staff, but as a person of value. And it was all because Lee Min-ho had chosen to speak up when it mattered most. In the car, as they drove back to their destination, Lee Min-ho sat back quietly, reflecting on the day. He knew that what had happened in the store was important, but he also understood that the impact of those moments could extend far beyond just one incident. His actions might have been small to him, standing up for a friend in need, but to the people who witnessed it, it was a reminder of how simple acts of respect can reverberate across communities. Lee Min-ho glanced over at his waiter. You know, he said, breaking the silence, people often forget how much words and actions can affect others. A moment of kindness or a moment of cruelty, it all adds up. The waiter nodded thoughtfully, his expression now more confident than it had been earlier in the day. I've learned that today. And I'll never forget it. Lee Min-ho smiled. That's the thing. If everyone could remember that, even just a little more, I think the world would be a better place. As the car drove through the city, the quiet confidence in the waiter's demeanor didn't go unnoticed. It was a subtle shift, but it was one that carried a lot of weight. He knew that what had happened in the store wasn't just a moment of justice, it was the beginning of something much larger. Perhaps, in some small way, it would inspire others to act with the same level of kindness and respect that Lee Min-ho had shown. The days that followed continued to build on the momentum of that one impactful moment in the store. Lee Min-ho's intervention had been more than just an act of kindness, it had sparked a series of thoughts, conversations, and reflections. People who had witnessed the event or heard about it began to rethink how they treated others in their everyday lives. The story spread through social media, and while it didn't dominate headlines, it reached a deep place within many who had been touched by the actor's actions. At a public event a few weeks later, Lee Min-ho was asked by a reporter about the incident at the store. The question was casual, almost an afterthought, but Lee Min-ho's response revealed the depth of his feelings. It's not about standing up for me or standing up for anyone just because they work for me, he said. It's about recognizing the inherent dignity of every person, regardless of their role or status. People sometimes forget that it's the way we treat those around us, whether we know them or not, that really matters. His words resonated with many, especially those who had followed his career closely and admired his public persona. But this moment, this conversation, revealed another side to Lee Min-ho that many hadn't seen before, the side that wasn't just about performing on screen, but about acting with integrity and moral strength off-screen as well. The waiter, too, found himself reflecting on the incident in ways he hadn't anticipated. He had worked for Lee Min-ho for years, but after that day in the store, his entire perspective on his work, and even his worth, had shifted. He began to stand taller, not because of the attention he had received but because he understood that he wasn't invisible. He wasn't just a waiter anymore, he was a person with value, deserving of respect, just like anyone else. One day, while working with Lee Min-ho at an event, the waiter found himself in a conversation with a young man who had recognized him from the incident in the store. The young man, eager to express his admiration for what Lee Min-ho had done, looked at the waiter and said, "I don't think you know how much what happened that day meant to a lot of people. It's not often that someone with the kind of influence Lee Min-ho has chooses to stand up for people like you. But he did. That's rare." The waiter, still not fully accustomed to such open praise, smiled gratefully. "It wasn't about what he did for me. It's about the message it sent." He could have ignored it, but he didn't. He made it clear that respect is something we should all have for each other. The young man nodded, clearly impressed. That's the thing, isn't it? It's not just about standing up when things are big or obvious. It's about doing the right thing, even when no one is looking. The waiter's heart warmed at the thought. He realized that the lessons Lee Min-ho had unknowingly shared through his actions were now spreading to others. It wasn't just about the direct impact on his own life, it was about how that simple act of kindness had caused a ripple effect, influencing others to treat those around them with more consideration and respect. Meanwhile, Lee Min-ho continued to be approached by people who had heard of the incident and felt compelled to share their own stories. Some spoke about how they had once been in a similar position, belittled in public or treated poorly by others based on their job or status. And some shared how Lee Min-ho's words had inspired them to stand up for someone else, to challenge their own assumptions, and to be more aware of how they treated the people around them. For Lee Min-ho, these moments were the true reward. The stories were reminders that kindness and respect had a power that transcended fame or recognition. It was a reminder that small actions, when done with sincerity and intention, could cause waves of positive change. As he reflected on the impact of that day in the store, Lee Min-ho found himself more committed than ever to living by the principles he had always held close. The journey was ongoing, and while he had been the catalyst for this particular moment, it was clear that the lessons were far-reaching, rippling out to affect not just his own team, but countless others who had been inspired by the simple truth that we all deserve respect. He looked at his waiter one afternoon and smiled. "You know, I think that moment in the store might have been one of the most important things I've done in my life." The waiter, now walking with a quiet confidence, nodded. "It was more than just a moment for me, it was a wake-up call. Not just about how others treat me, but about how I treat myself. That moment changed everything." Lee Min-ho smiled. "And that's what it's all about, isn't it? Changing how we see ourselves and others." As weeks passed, the ripple effect of that small yet powerful moment in the store continued to reverberate. Lee Min-ho's actions had not only impacted the people who witnessed them but had also sparked a broader conversation about respect, dignity, and kindness. It wasn't just the waiter who had gained a newfound sense of pride. The story of that day inspired countless others to examine their own behaviors and attitudes, both in public and in private. One day, Lee Min-ho received a letter from a young woman who worked in a restaurant. She shared how, after reading about the incident in the store, she had begun to stand up for herself when treated unfairly by customers. "For years, I kept quiet because I thought my voice didn't matter," the letter read. "But after seeing what you did for your waiter, I realized that I deserve to be treated with respect. Your actions have given me the courage to speak up." Lee Min-ho was deeply moved by the letter. It wasn't just the act of standing up for someone else that mattered, it was the reminder that everyone deserved respect, no matter their position in life. The story had given people the confidence to reclaim their own sense of self-worth, and that was something that couldn't be measured in fame or accolades. The impact of his actions had gone far beyond anything he had initially imagined. In another conversation with his waiter, Lee Min-ho reflected on how much had changed since that day. "You know, I think it's the small things that really count in life," he said thoughtfully. "It's easy to get caught up in the big gestures, the attention, the applause. But sometimes, it's the quiet moments, when you choose to stand up for someone else, that really make the difference." The waiter, who had grown more confident and reflective over the weeks, nodded in agreement. "I used to think that my role was small, that it didn't matter. But now, I see that every role, no matter how small it seems, deserves respect. And it's not just about standing up for others, it's about recognizing our own worth, too." Lee Min-ho smiled at the waiter's newfound perspective. "Exactly. We all have the power to change the way we see the world and how we treat others. It's about recognizing the value in everyone, no matter their role." And as they went about their days, serving others, and living out the lessons they had both learned, it became clear that this moment, this seemingly simple act of kindness, had done far more than just defend one person. It had become a catalyst for change in a world where respect often takes a backseat to status and superficial judgments. The waiter, now walking with his head held a little higher, couldn't help but feel grateful for the shift in his life. He had learned not only to expect respect but to demand it for himself and for others. And in turn, Lee Min-ho had learned that the true power of his influence didn't come from the fame or recognition, it came from using his voice to make the world a little more just, one small act at a time. As they both stood in the quiet of the evening, reflecting on how far they had come, Lee Min-ho turned to his waiter and said, "This is just the beginning. The ripple we've created, it's not about us. It's about inspiring others to do the same. To treat people with respect, no matter who they are or what they do. If we can do that, then we've truly made a difference." The waiter smiled, a deep sense of gratitude and purpose in his heart. And it all started with one moment. A small act of kindness. As Lee Min-ho and his waiter walked away from the conversation, they both knew that their lives had been forever changed by that moment in the store. What had begun as an act of standing up for someone in the face of ridicule had sparked something much larger than either of them had anticipated. The ripple effect was not just confined to their immediate circle, it had begun to spread throughout the world, touching countless lives and inspiring others to re-examine their own actions and attitudes. Months later, the story of the incident continued to be shared across social media platforms, discussed in schools and workplaces, and even mentioned in discussions about social responsibility. People began to embrace the idea that respect and kindness should not be conditional. It wasn't about what someone wore or what job they did, it was about recognizing their inherent value as human beings. Lee Min-ho received messages from fans all over the world, expressing their admiration for how he handled the situation. Many shared how the story had encouraged them to treat the people around them with more compassion. One particularly touching message came from a young man who worked at a cafe. "I've always struggled with feeling small in the world, but after hearing about what happened, I realized that my role matters too. I started standing up for myself and others at work, and it's made such a difference. Thank you for showing me how to find my voice." These messages were more than just words of appreciation, they were proof that Lee Min-ho's actions had truly made a difference in the lives of others. The waiter had become a symbol of the everyday heroism that so often goes unnoticed, the people who serve others quietly, without expectation of recognition, yet still deserve to be treated with respect and dignity. For Lee Min-ho, this journey had taught him something profound about the power of influence. He had always known that as a celebrity, he could use his platform to entertain, but now he understood that the real power of his position lay in using it for good. His influence had the potential to inspire change, to encourage others to act with kindness, and to remind people that every single person, no matter their position in society, deserved respect. One evening, after a long day of filming, Lee Min-ho and his waiter sat down to have a quiet dinner together. The waiter, who had once felt invisible in the world of luxury and fame, now felt seen. And more importantly, he felt empowered. He no longer saw himself as just the waiter in the background, he saw himself as a person of value, with the right to be treated with dignity by everyone he encountered. "I never expected this," the waiter said quietly, looking at Lee Min-ho. "But I've learned that we all have the power to change things. The way we treat others matters." Lee Min-ho smiled, his heart warmed by the transformation he saw in his friend. "It's all about the little moments," he said. "We don't need to make grand gestures every day. But we do need to be aware of how our actions affect the people around us. If we can do that, we'll be part of something much bigger." As they finished their meal and laughed together, it was clear that the story of that one day in the store wasn't just a chapter in their lives, it was the beginning of a new chapter, one where they both understood that kindness, respect, and the courage to stand up for what's right could create a lasting impact on the world. And so, if you've made it this far, type respect in the comments. Let's all commit to treating others with dignity, no matter who they are or what role they play. Because we all deserve respect.